Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today we're talking about weight loss plateaus, how you can prevent them, how you can negate them once they start to happen, and also how you can more properly identify whether or not you're actually in a weight loss plateau. What we find is that a lot of times people think they're in a weight loss plateau and they're actually not. I'll explain that in depth in just a moment. Before we get into it all, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe so you can help support the channel and get more great videos like this. I've got lots of content coming to you regarding weight loss, weight management, clinical obesity, and every component of body composition and longevity. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into it. So, let's first talk about how you're actually tracking your weight loss, because you can't be in a weight loss plateau unless you're actually stopping the weight loss process. And the only way to really know that is if you're tracking your weight appropriately. Now, this brings me to the point of scale weight or BMI. Either way, those are not effective tools. And I know that sounds really surprising. I know I get some pushback from people because they'll say, well, the medical world uses BMI and BMI has to do with my insurance and, scale weight. I mean, everybody gets on the scale to see if they lost weight. Let me explain this to you. I want to make sure that what I'm about to tell you really resonates. Because if you use this information right, it will change the rest of your life. I'm not kidding. And not just in terms of weight management, but in terms of understanding other components regarding your body composition and longevity, including things like blood sugar management and all kinds of other health related topics. So please take to heart what I'm about to tell you. The scale is telling you your total weight of everything. It's not just body fat. It is body fat as well as lean muscle tissue, as well as bone mineral weight, for your bone mineral density, the weight of your organs, your cartilage, your water weight, etc. All of that goes into making you up, and it's not static. It's going to flux throughout the day. It's always fluxing. And so, for that reason, when you get up on the scale and you say to yourself, shoot, I weigh the same as I weighed a week ago, that must mean that I didn't lose any weight. That is not the way you want to look at it, because over the course of that week, your water weight has gone up and down. More on that in a moment, okay? But I'll come back to it. Water weight has gone up and down. Your muscle mass has even had a little bit of flux. And we're talking small, but you could be gaining muscle if you're on a weight loss program. Even if you're not necessarily strength training, you actually can, and this does happen, gain muscle mass just by way of growth hormone and testosterone improvements from cardiovascular work and just by moving more. So it's important to understand that your muscle mass, your water weight, and even your bone mineral density to a smaller degree can all be increasing, which thereby is going to make you weigh a little bit more. So let me give you a hypothetical and then we'll talk further about the science and how you can figure all this out, okay? So let's say, for example, you've been on a program for a given period of time and the scale has not moved. Well, it's entirely possible that you've lost, let's say hypothetically, 4 pounds of body fat, which is great. You've lost 4 pounds. However, you might have also gained 2 pounds of water, probably because you're eating more high water foods like fruits and vegetables, and just because you're maintaining your water levels better, right? You're probably thinking more about it. So again, lost 4 pounds of fat, gained 2 pounds of water, and gained 2 pounds of muscle. And perhaps bone is in there too as part of that 2 pounds of muscle. Okay. So what I'm saying is that's hypothetical, but it's common. This happens a lot. In the time it takes a lot of people to lose 4 pounds of fat, you can gain about 1 or 2 pounds of muscle, especially if you're trying to. But even if you're not trying to, that can happen for some bodies. And then again, the water weight gains. Now, these are all wins. Losing the fat's a big win. Gaining the muscle is certainly a big win for every aspect of your physiology and your longevity, staying out of the hospital as you get older. And any bone mineral density certainly is a gain as well. So these are all good positive things. And having more water weight, frankly, most people need more water weight. Most people are dehydrated. So these are all really good things. And yet you would get on the scale and think, geez, the scale's not coming down. So I must be failing here. I must have a weight loss plateau, or I must just not be losing any body fat. And so that's why the scale does not make any sense. The scale would be great if it could tell you only what's happening with your body fat, right? That's really what your intention is when you get on the scale. You want to see, did you gain fat or did you lose fat? But again, the scale doesn't tell you that. Now, what you can do, and this is what I do with my clients, I have them use a body composition device. We have these handheld tools, and there's some scales that are pretty accurate. The only problem with these is that the standard deviation, the level of accuracy, is give or take a few percent, especially for women. Women's bodies are more complicated than men's. And so because it's a few percent standard deviation, you can't be one of these people who's hovering over it every day or even every week or two, because the amount of fat you can expect to lose is going to be smaller than that standard deviation. And so, long story short, I only really recommend checking body composition about every 3 to 6 weeks, depending upon how frequently you're training and how on point your nutrition and sleep are, etc. So, long story short, body composition is the way to go, even though it's not 100% accurate. That's a better tool. The scale does not make a lot of sense. I know I get some pushback here because the medical world uses the scale. And they use BMI, which essentially is the scale when you really break it down. And groups like Weight Watchers and all these big weight loss corporations, they all look at the scale. What's important for you to understand is that none of those solutions are actually long-term good viable solutions. Okay, don't get me wrong. If you're 400 pounds and you haven't exercised for years and you lose 5 or 10 pounds, there's a very good chance most of that's body fat. That's probably a good step in the right direction initially. But in the grand scheme, we want to ensure you're not losing muscle, which is very, very common, and that what you're losing is actually body fat. And if you're not losing, in the case of a weight loss plateau, we want to know, is that actually the case? Or is what's happening to you what I explained a little bit earlier? So, very important that you are actually checking your true body composition as opposed to the scale. The scale is rarely going to be very indicative of what's happening. And even when it is, it's only for a short time in your program. As your program gets further along, it's not going to be telling you anything anymore, because there's going to come a point where your muscle to fat ratio is going to matter a lot more. And those changes that you're seeing in the scale are less indicative of body fat. All right. So all that said, now what can you do to prevent or turn around an actual fat loss plateau? If we do identify that you have one, let's say that you've got a program put together that you thought was going to be beneficial, and now for the last month or two, you haven't seen any body fat loss. Okay, two most common situations are either your calorie deficit is too big for your body, and that the body essentially goes into what we often call starvation mode, where the hypothalamus and other components of your physiology start to decide that, wait a minute, it's like we're not getting any calories now. This is severe. We used to get this many calories. Now we're only getting this many. This is pretty scary. We better hold on to our body fat. And so even when that happens, even though you're creating this huge calorie deficit, usually over 1,000 calories a day will start to do this. Even when you have this huge calorie deficit and you go to your coach and you say, I'm eating right. I've got a big calorie deficit. I'm getting my workouts. Geez, what could be going wrong? How is my body holding on to fat? That's usually why, is your calorie deficit each day is too high, and that you're scaring your body. Think of it as if you lost your job. Your first thought might be that, okay, I lost my job, so I need to start saving money. That's the mentality that your body will have if you all of a sudden go too big on your caloric deficit each day. Now, on the other hand, calorie deficits are often too small. I'm going to give you a quick example, very practical. This happens a lot. Someone will create a calorie deficit of, let's say, 500 calories a day, which is usually pretty modest for most people. That usually can work. But they'll do that Monday to Friday or so. So they'll have, from Monday to Friday, a 2,500 calorie deficit, which is nice. That's on your way to a pound of fat. And then on the weekends, they'll tend to blow it a little bit. They'll say, well, on Saturday, I just tried to eat right, but I didn't really follow my macronutrients, my proteins, carbs, and fats. So maybe in a case like that, the calorie deficit isn't really there. Maybe instead of losing 500 calories, you broke even. Okay, not so bad. We still had a 2,500 calorie deficit Monday to Friday. Now maybe Saturday is more level. And then Sunday, you go crazy. You go out to eat, you have family over, there's some desserts around, and you don't realize how quickly you can really negate that 500 calorie deficit in one bad day. A bad day is not usually going over by 100 calories or 150. It's usually a lot. It's like 1,000 or two, especially if alcohol is involved, then forget it. Even a little bit of alcohol or a little bit of dessert, frankly, can really create a big caloric surplus. So what I'm getting at is people will lose around 2,500 during the week. Then on the weekends, they end up gaining back maybe 2,000 or so of those 25. And by the end of the week, it's like we're pretty much at a wash or maybe a very small calorie deficit of just a few hundred calories, in which case it would take you a tremendous amount of time to actually, to really see any significant, meaningful body fat loss. So this is where I'd suggest you really need, if you're someone who doesn't like to count calories much, or you don't like to be that precise, and you don't like to weigh your food, and you like to eat out, these are the things that can really get in the way and make you end up in a weight loss plateau or a body fat loss plateau is that you're just either going too high in your calorie deficit and you're scaring the body, or you're going too low and inconsistent, like in the example I just provided. And in a case like that, you think you're making an effort because you're doing things that Monday to Friday you're trying to do what you can. It's the slip ups that go far bigger than you would imagine. They can really be a lot more devastating to your body than what you would think. And then, of course, there's the people who just aren't tracking calories at all. I see this a lot. They'll come to me and say, well, I don't want to count my calories. I don't want to get crazy about it, but I just want to generally make better choices. That doesn't do anything. In most cases, that will not really help you. Either you'll end up losing muscle mass, which is the last thing you want to do, or you'll lose weight for a very small amount of time. You'll lose some body fat for a short amount of time, and that's it. At the end of the day, you need to be able to give your body the caloric deficit that it needs, and you need to be consistent with it. If you really want to have confident, meaningful fat loss that's going to be sustainable, where you don't just lose a little bit of fat and then bring it right back on. Keep in mind the statistics. Most people who do this wrong, who negate the science, who don't involve the kind of calorie deficits that I'm talking about, who don't get the protein that they need, most people who don't do a proper clinically devised program are not successful in the long run at all. 95% of people fail. They either lose the fat and gain it right back, or they just don't lose it at all. People who really do it right and engage the science and get into all the right protocols and really get the right coach and do this properly, over 95% are successful. So it's a huge, huge difference. But again, those differences come down to not relying on the scale as a metric, use body composition, even though it's a little bit imperfect. And again, having the right level of caloric deficit without going too far or not far enough. Now, that said, I'd say in general, you generally want a calorie deficit of around 500 calories per day, up to potentially 1,000. The way that I do this, and I think this really helps people very well, is if you've got a history of trying all kinds of different things and your metabolism's been very up and down and you've been kind of a yo-yo dieter, generally we need to start smaller, 500, 600 or so, maybe 700 calories, depending upon your body weight. And how comfortable you are with exercise as well, and how strong your joints are, and how strong your heart is. That's where I'll usually decide around 500 to 700 calories per day is an appropriate deficit. For people whose bodies are more consistent and who don't have terrible up and down, and they've only really been overweight for a short time, and their body's fairly strong and can handle some pretty adaptive exercise, then we can go closer to 1,000 usually calories per day in a deficit. And at the end of the day, you always have to just see how those first couple of weeks go. I have to get feedback from someone about how hungry they are. Has sleep been disrupted? What's their mood like throughout the day? Those first couple of weeks tell us a lot about whether this starting goal is going to be really appropriate or if we need to make some changes right off the bat. So anyway, I hope this video has been helpful in understanding exactly what a weight loss plateau is and why they can happen, and what you can do to help prevent them and negate them. Again, everybody has a lot of different factors, and everything you can tell me about yourself is going to help me to give you more personalized advice. So feel free to reach out to me in the comments, or you can call me. My phone number is down there as well in the description. As always, everybody, I'm looking forward to your health and wellness success. And don't forget, I've got a 7-question questionnaire in the description as well. It's 10 questions. If you answered those 10 questions, then I'll be able to contact you and we can talk a lot more in depth about your own weight management and how you can start getting great results right away. All right, everyone, I'll see you in the next podcast. Thanks so much.